Hello and welcome to this session in which we will discuss the concept of net position when it comes to governmental accounting. Net position represents the difference between the government assets and the government liabilities. What does that mean? We'll take assets plus deferred outflow of resources minus liabilities minus deferred inflow of resources. And we saw this formula before, and when we used this formula in a prior session, we came up with something called fund balance. Now in this recording, we're going to call this net position. So what's the difference between fund balance and net position, which we need to discuss in this session? We already discussed fund balance. Well, it all depends which accounting basis is the entity is using. When we use net position, it means the company is using the full accrual. Who uses the full accrual basis? Enterprise fund, internal service fund, government-wide financial statements. Therefore, they use the concept of net position. Now, this concept is also similar. Assets minus liabilities equal to what? Equal to equity. So the concept is the same when it comes to businesses. Businesses use the term equity. We use net position for full accrual funds and government-wide financial statement, and the term fund balance for what? For modified accrual basis. And remember, under the fund balance, we learn about 5 categories. Net position will have 3 categories. So the net position is categorized into 3 categories: net investment in capital asset, restricted net position, and unrestricted net position. I'm going to define each one, show you an example from the real world, work multiple choice questions to help you understand this concept. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, FarhatLectures.com. Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses, broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today. Net investment in capital asset. This represents the total value of capital asset, like building, infrastructure, equipment, minus any related debt used to acquire these assets, minus accumulated depreciation. In other words, it shows the assets that's invested in capital asset, net of debt, and net of accumulated depreciation. This figure is crucial because it tells us how much of the government resources are tied up in long-term assets. So simply put, on the balance sheet, it would look something like this: capital asset, less accumulated depreciation, less outstanding debt. This is basically what it looks like. Now, often they will show it as net investment in capital asset, but this is the computation to get to that. Then we have restricted net position. From it, the word restricted. This refers to the government net position that's subject to external restriction, constraints, or any types of limitation. These restriction, when it's external, it's usually imposed by creditors, grantors, laws, or regulation. This restricted net position is important because it represents the resources that the government cannot use for any purpose other than that specific purpose for which they are restricted. So why do we do this? It gives you a picture, an insight into the amount of resources that are earmarked for specific activities or an objective. Therefore, politicians can't use them for something else. So for example, on the balance sheet, you'll have the restricted net position and you'll have restricted, many restricted. We'll look at an example. Unrestricted net position. This is the part where the net position is not restricted or tied up in capital asset or for any other reason. It represents the resources available for the politician to spend for any reason. And politicians love unrestricted net position. But unrestricted net position is a key indicator of the government financial flexibility and its ability to meet ongoing obligation and fund services. Now, an unrestricted net position can be negative, which might indicate financial challenges, and it suggests that the government may not have enough liquid asset because it's negative. And on the balance sheet, it would look something like this: unrestricted net position and the amount. Now, the best way to illustrate this is to look at an example. And for the sake of illustration, I'm showing you the city of Philadelphia. You can look up your own city if you're interested. Net position, this is the category net position. Now, this is a partial balance sheet. You have to understand above this you have the assets and you have the liabilities, but this is the balance sheet net position. And the first thing we have is net investment in capital asset. This is for the governmental activities, the enterprise, the business type activities, the total, and the component unit. So notice this is one category, one of the three, net investment in capital asset. Now, obviously, they will have another schedule showing you how they came up with this 622,600, which is, detailed schedule how they came up with this. The second category for net position is restricted net position, and you can see here a bunch of examples: capital project, debt service, grant program, rate stabilization, libraries and park. Those are positions or net assets that are restricted for cultural and commercial corridor project, rebuild project, net position that is restricted. Then the city of Philadelphia will have a category, just like any other city, unrestricted or deficit. And notice the city of Philadelphia, deficit, 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 deficit. It could be deficit, it could be positive. Nevertheless, it's unrestricted. You don't want deficit because it means deficit. Basically, you don't have any extra. Matter of fact, your programs are running at a loss. Your expenditure are greater than your revenues, or your expenses are greater than your revenues. So this is the third net position. Let's take a look at a multiple choice question from Farhat Lectures that's going to help you understand this concept. What does net investment in capital asset in governmental accounting represent? Well, does it represent the total amount of cash in government reserve? No, that's not the total cash, the total amount of cash in government reserve. It's simply cash. So A is out. The value of capital asset minus any related outstanding debt. Yes, that sounds right. And minus accumulated depreciation, but that's partially right. The annual budget for capital expenditure. No, there is a budget for the capital expenditure, but it's not the net investment in capital asset. The total revenue generated from capital asset. This is tempting because you think investment, capital asset must be total revenue. No, total revenue generated from capital asset is if we are generating any revenue from capital asset, that's not net investment. Net investments is capital asset, the value of capital asset minus related debt to acquire those assets minus any accumulated depreciation. What should you do now? You want to go to Farhat Lectures, look at additional MCQs. That's going to help you do what? Understand net position for governmental accounting better. Remember, we have three categories: net investment in capital asset, net unrestricted position, and net restricted position. Study hard, invest in yourself, especially if you're studying for your CPA exam, and stay safe.